I was the only daughter of General Peter Jansen from the Military District of Washington. When I was 5, I was finally found and brought home. My parents' adopted daughter, Sabrina Jansen, was convinced that I had taken what was rightfully hers and began to make my life a living hell in every way possible. My brother, Nicholas Jansen, told me she'd been pampered since childhood and had quite the temper. So I was expected to accommodate her. I knew Sabrina's parents were dead and she had no one else to rely on, so I tried to be patient with her. Later, my father sent his subordinates to select outstanding officers from several military districts and had me draw lots to choose a fiancé on my 21st birthday. But Nicholas deliberately tampered with the lots, making sure I picked the worst candidate out of the bunch. It happened to be an old officer stationed at the border who had long been crippled and disfigured during a mission. A collective gasp rippled through the room, followed by a cacophony of whistling and shouting that refused to die down. I stood rooted to the spot, trying not to cry. Nicholas said, his tone serious, "You deserved it. Savvy said you took the off-road car she had her eye on first. I'm her brother, so I've got to stand up for her. No one messes with Savvy. I was just trying to cheer her up. Don't worry, though. You're the general's only daughter. There's no way we'd make you marry some old, crippled geezer." His favoritism towards Sabrina made my chest ache so much I could barely breathe. In his eyes, his real sister's dignity mattered less than a single pout from his adopted sister. I froze upon hearing Nicholas' words. As if all the blood in my body had stopped flowing, the guests below whispered among themselves, their murmurs filling the air. Nicholas cleared his throat and spoke up, trying to salvage the situation. "Chloe's hand slipped just now. That result is invalid. We're doing a redraw." As he spoke, he discreetly looked toward Lucas Riley. Lucas was my childhood sweetheart and the one I was desperately waiting to be matched with today. I instinctively looked up at him. Clad in his military blues, he leaned against the corridor pillar, looking sharp and commanding. He possessed the ideal build, broad shoulders tapering down to a lean waist. Beneath the brim of his cap, his features were so refined and handsome. He sensed my gaze. A trace of coldness flashed through his eyes. He straightened up and said loudly, "This custom is supposed to be impartial. Since when do we throw away the results just because they didn't go your way? As the general's daughter, do you really intend to go back on your word in front of everyone?" My heart sank sharply as I clenched my dress so tightly my knuckles turned white. Voices immediately echoed around us. "Major Riley is right. A draw is a commitment. To change it on a whim would be a mockery of fairness itself. We all know General Jansen is a man of his word. Surely, he wouldn't want to break that streak of honor over something like this, would he?" Seeing the situation spiral out of control, Nicholas pointed at Lucas angrily. "You grew up with Coco. Back at the military compound, you even said you'd marry her only. What's with all this now?" Laughter immediately broke out below, and someone shouted playfully, "Isn't it obvious? Major Riley's in love with someone else. Just yesterday, he was spotted shopping for jewelry with Ms. Sabrina. They bought so much it was like he'd tried to buy the entire store for her," someone added. "I heard he was forced to show up by his parents. The last thing he wants is to be chosen." So that was how it was. I lowered my head slowly while holding back my tears. After taking a deep breath, I stepped forward. I picked up the microphone. My voice was not loud, but it echoed throughout the hall. "Who says we're forfeiting the result? The lot is drawn, and I accept it. I will marry him." Nicholas snapped his head around to look at me, his voice sharp and urgent. "Coco, are you out of your mind? You're the general's only daughter. Are you really going to marry that cripple?" I turned my head to look at him tearfully. Once upon a time, my brother shielded me behind his back and protected me from all harm. But now, with just a casual, offhanded remark from Sabrina about how I'd stolen her ride, he had personally pushed me into the abyss at my 21st birthday celebration. I shrugged, smiling faintly. "Nicholas, isn't this exactly what you wanted? Now that I'm marrying an old man, it'll make Sabrina happy, right?" Nicholas froze for a moment, his brows knitting tightly. "Why are you still blaming Sabby for this? You were the one who started it. What she did today was only—" I could no longer hear the rest of his excuses. I simply turned around. lifted my skirt, and descended the stage. The guests all stepped back, instinctively clearing a path for me. Their curious, sympathetic, and mocking gazes felt like a bunch of needles prickling me. As I passed by Lucas, he suddenly spoke up and stopped me. His tone carried a trace of self-righteous persuasion. "Coco, don't joke about your whole future just to spite me. You can't just marry someone like that." He took a step closer, softening his tone as if he truly cared. "We grew up together, and I've always treated you like my own sister. Give me some time, and I'll find a good candidate for you." I turned around and smiled sarcastically. "A sister, huh?" Lucas instantly fell silent, guilt flashing across his eyes. My gaze was sharp as a blade as I stared straight at him. "Just admit it, Lucas. You had a change of heart. I might even respect you more if you had the nerve to own up to it." Lucas' face turned deathly pale. He tried to speak, but ended up turning away silently. I did not stop to linger. My skirt brushed past his polished military boots as I left, and I headed toward the figure sitting in a wheelchair at the corner of the hall. The murmurs filling the hall vanished in an instant, as if the air itself had frozen. Nicholas leaned over the railing on the second floor, nearly half his body hanging out as he shouted urgently, "That's enough, Chloe. Stop acting like a child." Lucas stood where he was, his jaw clenched tight, anger filling his expression. At that moment, everyone's attention was on me. I bent down slightly and looked straight at the man whose face was partially covered by a silver-gray mask. The fingers resting on the wheelchair's armrests were covered in scars, and a thin cashmere blanket lay over his legs. "Do you want to marry me?" The man in the wheelchair gulped, and his eyes, unobstructed by the mask, glinted sharply. His voice was clear and steady. "Are you not going to regret this?" "I won't." "All right, let's get married." Nicholas rushed down the stairs, but Lucas reached out and stopped him just before he could reach me. "If you go over now, you'll only be giving her exactly what she wants." "What do you mean by that?" Nicholas asked. Lucas let out a cold laugh, his gaze fixed firmly on my back. "She's just acting out of spite. Do you think she'd actually marry a cripple?" I listened to the restrained argument behind me without turning around, simply extending my hand toward the man in the wheelchair. His palm was rough yet warm as it firmly closed around my fingers. Nicholas, Lucas, and I had grown up together in the military compound, and we were inseparable since childhood. That was until 5 years ago, when I went to the border to visit Lucas during a mission and went missing by accident, completely losing contact with them. My parents were deeply shaken by it, and the house never again had its former laughter. That was until Sabrina appeared. She was the daughter of my father's comrade in arms. Her parents had died during a mission, and her features bore an uncanny resemblance to mine. Seeing how pitiful she was, my parents immediately took her in and raised her, telling outsiders she was the daughter of a distant relative. Sabrina had a bright, bubbly personality. Within days, she had charmed everyone in the household with her sweet talking. From then on, the once quiet home slowly came back to life because of her arrival. As time passed, it seemed everyone gradually forgot that I existed at all. It wasn't until half a year ago, when the border conflict subsided, that I escaped from enemy territory by sheer luck and traveled thousands of kilometers back home. I thought I would be met with warmth after a long separation, but they kept their distance instead, afraid that Sabrina might be upset. The night I returned home, I heard my mother personally comforting Sabrina. "Savvy, you will always be the one we cherish the most. That will never change," she said. "After all, your sister has spent years in those slums. I'm sure she's no longer well-mannered, and she can't possibly compare to someone as thoughtful as you," she added. It felt like a bucket of ice water had been dumped all over me, leaving me frozen outside the door. I was still clutching the lucky charm my mother had given me before I went missing, my grip so tight it felt as though the trinket might shatter. News that Peter Jansen's daughter was going to marry an old cripple quickly spread through Washington, D.C.'s inner circles. When I returned home, my parents and brother were chatting in the living room, while Sabrina leaned against my mother, playing with a new diamond necklace in her hands. As soon as Nicholas finished speaking, my father slammed his palm on the coffee table. "This is ridiculous. She's going to be a huge disgrace. My mother tidied the jewelry boxes on the table without lifting her head. When Coco comes back, don't yell at her. Otherwise, she'll stir up even more trouble. She continued, she only said she'd marry a cripple out of spite because Luke embarrassed her in public. She doesn't even know the man's name or where he lives. Do you think she'd really dare marry him and never see us again? Sabrina broke into tears just then, sounding rather choked up. It's all my fault, Mom. If I hadn't told Nicholas about the off-road car, he wouldn't have punished her for it, and she wouldn't be acting out of spite. My mother pulled out a tissue to wipe Sabrina's face tenderly, her tone gentle. Silly child, what does this have to do with you? Ever since your sister came back, we've been making you suffer just to accommodate her. It's just a tiny setback. Don't worry about her. My father added in a low voice, Savvy, don't blame yourself. Your sister is only acting on impulse. She won't really ruin her whole life by marrying someone like that. My mother picked up an emerald bracelet and slipped it onto Sabrina's wrist with a smile. Come on, take your pick. Your father bought all of this for you. Hurry up, or Chloe might come back and insist on wanting them too. Before she could finish, my mother caught sight of me standing quietly in the entryway from the corner of her eye. The emerald bracelet slipped from her hand and onto the floor, shattering into pieces. When their eyes met mine, everyone's expressions froze instantly. In the past, I would have thrown a fit and questioned my mother about why she was so wary of me. Even when I never fought with Sabrina for anything, I would have asked my father and Nicholas why they only doted on her. Had they ever cared whether I lived or died? Perhaps the years spent in utter despair had worn me down. Or perhaps the moment I took that man's hand in the banquet hall, I no longer had any expectations from my family. Under everyone's tense gazes, I simply turned and went upstairs in silence, not sparing them a single glance. 3 days later, I met that man at a quiet cafe in the southern part of the city. Raindrops tapped against the glass as I absent-mindedly stirred my latte until the soft sound of a rolling wheelchair stopped in front of my table. I snapped back to my senses and looked at the man, only to be taken aback. Only now did I see that the exposed parts of his face revealed a refined bone structure, sharp and striking, exuding a cold, deep presence. Miss Chloe, don't you recognize me anymore? His voice carried a hint of amusement, clear like a mountain spring. He wore a neatly pressed white shirt today. The silver-gray half-mask gleamed coolly in the daylight, his gaze sharp, his pupils a rare amber color. As I continued to freeze, his gaze locked straight onto me. I hurriedly cleared my throat and forced myself to sound calm. What's your name? Chadwick Burke. He smoothly maneuvered his wheelchair to a stop across from me. With long, well-defined fingers, he poured himself a glass of water. The simple movement carried an unmistakable air of composure. I suppressed the strange feeling in my chest, took a bank card from my handbag, and pushed it toward him. Please pick me up from the Jansons' residence in half a month. This should be enough to cover the necessary arrangements. Chadwick's gaze swept over the card without taking it. Instead, he looked up at me directly, scrutiny in his eyes. Miss Chloe, are you sure you want to marry a cripple like me? My fingers tightened, but I lifted my chin instead. What's the matter? Are you afraid we treat you like a pushover? He let out a low laugh at that, gently but firmly pushing the card back toward me. What's the meaning of this? I frowned. There's no reason to use a woman's money. When he looked up, his gaze was sharp, and his tone left no room for doubt. Wait for me. In half a month, I'll be there to pick you up. It'll be a grand show. I froze. Thinking of what I'd been going through at home, tears welled up in my eyes. I took a deep breath, yet my voice came out unusually clear. If it's possible, please come and get me as soon as you can. Catching sight of the redness at the corner of my eyes, Chadwick paused slightly, his Adam's apple bobbing once. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weighty seriousness. All right. When I returned home, dinner had already begun. Lucas was there as well, seated right beside Sabrina. When they saw me, the laughter at the table stopped abruptly, and their smiles froze. The dining room, which had been lively moments before, instantly fell into an awkward silence. Nicholas was the first to react, waving at me. Come and have dinner, Coco. I'm not hungry. I'll be in my room. I turned to leave. Coco, my mother, called after me, standing up and walking over. There's something we need to discuss. I stopped. What is it? She walked up to me and hesitated before speaking. Your father and I have talked it over, and we're going forward with Sabby and Luke's wedding. I turned to look at Lucas, who instinctively avoided my gaze. A trace of mockery passed over my lips. My mother held my hand. I know you and Luke grew up together, but feelings are about mutual affection, not who came first. We'll definitely make it up to you later. I gently withdrew my hand and cut her off. It's fine. I have no objections. All the best to them. I didn't expect Lucas to chase after me. He grabbed my wrist, gripping it so hard that I couldn't break free. Lucas, what are you doing? I asked with a frown. He lowered his head slightly and softened his voice. I know you said those things out of anger. You must be feeling terrible right now, right? Was I hurting? Well, the pain wasn't unbearable. At most, I just felt a bit wistful. I had always thought Sabrina could take anyone from me, except Lucas, when I first returned home half a year ago. Sabrina loved staging all kinds of framed scenarios, always making herself look like the victim. And no matter how much I tried to explain myself, Lucas was the only one who'd believe me. He would gently hold my wrist and look at me firmly. I believe you, Coco. I'll always have your back. Because Sabrina deliberately imitated me and tried to take my place, he always kept his distance from her advances. I thought that Lucas, who had sworn since youth to marry no one but me, and who never gave up searching for me during the 5 years I was missing, would be my final support. But just like the rest, he ended up hurting me. He once shouted, Chloe, no wonder even your own parents love their adopted daughter more than you. With your personality, who would ever like you? Even if I say an extra word to Sabby, you interrogate me endlessly, as if I've betrayed you. You're being unreasonable by suspecting me all day long. Fine, I'll say it clearly. Sabby is gentler than you, more sensible than you, and more worthy of love. I've fallen for her, so are you satisfied now? At that time, I treated him like the only driftwood while drowning, and even after he said such hurtful things. My first reaction wasn't anger, but doubting whether I had really done something wrong. It wasn't until later that I understood Lucas only ever claimed to dislike Sabrina, yet never truly rejected how she constantly crossed boundaries. It was his inconsistency and indecision that pushed me step by step to the edge of collapse. The problem was never with me, seeing how I stayed silent. Lucas thought he'd guessed correctly. He softened his tone and spoke with a hint of condescension. Coco, we grew up together and once loved each other. I don't want us to end up as total strangers. How about this? I'll talk to your parents, and after I marry Sabby, I'll marry you too. Don't worry, I'll treat you both equally and favor neither. I looked up in disbelief, almost wondering if I had misheard him. How could he be this shameless? Lucas mistook my shock for delight, and even smugly adjusted the cuff of his military uniform. But you have to promise me that after the wedding, you won't keep picking fights with Sabby like before. I couldn't listen anymore, and shoved him away, my suppressed anger exploding at once. Get lost. Half a month later, it was Sabrina's birthday. It was also the day Chadwick had promised to take me away. Over the past few days, the gossip in our circle had almost died down under my father's deliberate suppression. After all, no one truly believed that the general's daughter would marry a cripple. Even my parents and Nicholas believed what I said back then was just a moment of anger. They didn't know that I had long lost hope in this family and had never given up the thought of leaving. That morning, just as I was about to open the door, I heard hushed voices outside the courtyard. It was Nicholas. Be quiet. If she wakes up and finds out we're taking Sabby to Santorini for her birthday, she'll make a scene and ruin the trip. My mother sounded hesitant. Are we really leaving Coco home alone? I don't know why, but I feel uneasy. You're overthinking it, my father said while packing, urging them on. It wasn't easy to get this leave approved. There are guards and staff at home, she'll be fine. Sabrina pretended to have second thoughts. Should we invite Coco along? Nicholas snorted lightly. Do you think you'd have a peaceful birthday trip? My mother sighed. All right, we'll make it up to Coco when we return. Soon, Everything outside the door fell completely silent. I pried the door open and looked up at the cloudless blue sky. It was truly a beautiful day. I put on the wedding dress I had prepared long ago and then left. I didn't expect Chadwick to bring such a massive motorcade. Every car was a black ceremonial sedan, with bright red roses fixed to the hoods. He even had a military band play from DuPont Circle to Tacoma. Crowds gathered along the route, and handfuls of confetti and flower petals were tossed into the crowd. As I sat in the car, the blaring trumpets outside ringing in my ears, my first thought was how a disabled veteran in a wheelchair could afford such a grand display. But recalling the natural composure in his manner and speech, a gut feeling told me his identity was far from simple. My family stayed in Santorini for over half a month before returning home. The moment they stepped inside, an unusual silence hung in the air. The usually busy staff stood quietly in the corridor, the atmosphere heavy. My mother was the first to sense something was wrong and grabbed an aide. "Where is Chloe?" Everyone exchanged looks until the nanny stepped forward reluctantly, her voice trembling. "General, Miss Chloe got married half a month ago. We weren't able to stop her." "What?" My father, mother, and Nicholas spoke almost at the same time. The crystal chandelier in the corridor swang from the commotion. My father stepped forward sharply and demanded, "Who did she marry?" "It was the disabled veteran from the banquet. You know, the one that won the lot," the nanny stammered. "He even brought a motorcade and had a military band play all the way from DuPont Circle to Tacoma, and everyone's talking about it now." Hearing this, my mother's vision went dark and she collapsed backward, but Nicholas caught her just in time. Leaning against her son, she cried, "Gosh, how could this child be so foolish?" Sabrina gently patted my mother's back and sighed. Even if Chloe was angry, she shouldn't have done something so shameful to the family. She's made you so upset. As she turned, Nicholas caught the trace of smugness she hadn't hidden in time at the corner of her lips. He froze, then his voice suddenly turned cold, sharper than ever. "Savvy, Dad is already furious. Don't add fuel to the fire." Sabrina froze in shock, unable to believe her always doting brother would speak to her like this. Nicholas turned to face her, his gaze burning. The doubt in his heart grew heavier and heavier. "Savvy, tell me honestly," he said in a low voice. "The last time you said Coco pushed you into the pool at the military banquet. Was that really true?" Her face went pale as she tried to explain, but Nicholas cut her off coldly. "Think carefully before you speak. If I find out you're lying." Sabrina's fingers trembled behind her back, and when she spoke again, it seemed like she was about to cry. "I slipped and fell into the pool by accident. I was just too embarrassed and afraid you'd blame me for disgracing the family." Nicholas stared at her in disbelief. "So you framed Coco and said she pushed you into the pool? And you made me stand up for you, turning her 21st birthday party into a citywide joke." His face turned ashen. My mother stared at Sabrina in shock, her voice filled with disappointment. "Sabby, how could you do that?" Sabrina hid fearfully behind my father. Nicholas was about to press on, but my father cut him off sharply enough. "Sabby's still young, and she doesn't know any better. It's just a prank, so what's the big deal?" Nicholas froze. He opened his mouth, but when he saw the favoritism written all over his father's face, he couldn't bring himself to argue any further. The noon sunlight streamed through the floor, to ceiling windows, flooding the living room with light. Yet he felt a cold chill, and this was only the truth they admitted after he pressed them for it. What about all the grievances he had never even noticed? He was reminded of the past, where I'd argued countless times with reddened eyes, saying, "I didn't push her. She fell on her own. I didn't take it. I really didn't." But no one was ever willing to listen to me, and they'd already blamed me for it. Nicholas' eyes stung. He lowered his head and looked at his hands, suddenly realizing that his so-called neutral stance over the years was no different from our father's favoritism. He said nothing more and silently turned toward the bedroom upstairs. Meanwhile, Chadwick had a house in Tacoma. It wasn't large, just 2 bedrooms and a living room. But it was kept tidy. Newlywed decorations were pasted everywhere in the house. When my father barged in with the others, Chadwick had just stepped out. A guard kicked the front gate open, and my father stormed into the courtyard in a rage. He glanced at the decorations on the wall, then pointed at me and shouted, "Chloe, you've completely disgraced our family. Come back with me now," he ordered. I put down the scissors in my hand and looked at him calmly. "I'm married. This is my home." "Married?" He laughed as if he'd heard the biggest joke. "Where are your wedding gifts and dinner parties? What do you have? Is this even a marriage? You're an ingrate." My mother hurried forward and held my icy hand, her voice choking. "Coco, don't blame your dad. He's just worried about you. Come home with us, all right?" When I stayed silent, she softened her tone. "Putting pride aside, are you really willing to suffer in this shabby little place? We know we've wronged you because of Sabby, but she knows better now. I found it ridiculous. Last month, Sabrina falsely accused me of stealing her diamond bracelet, and they punished me with a week of confinement for my so-called bad behavior. Now that she was the one at fault, knowing her mistake was enough to sweep things under the rug. I lifted my head, my voice cold. "You want me to go back? Fine." My parents froze, waiting for what came next. "As long as you send Sabrina away." "No," they said in unison. The air froze instantly. I knew they'd refuse, and I laughed mockingly. My parents' affection had long been a luxury to me, and thankfully, I no longer expected it. My mother awkwardly tried to smooth things over. "Savvy is still your sister. What can a family get past?" As she spoke, she pulled Sabrina over. "Hurry and apologize to your sister." Sabrina stepped forward and grabbed my arm, her lashes trembling as she spoke pitifully. "It's all my fault, Coco. Come home with us." Before she finished speaking, her nails dug hard into my arm. I shoved her away and slapped her across the face. After the sharp crack, Sabrina fell to the ground, tears pouring out instantly. "I've already apologized, Coco. Why did you have to hit me?" My father flew into a rage and raised his hand toward me. The rush of his palm swept past my cheek, and I closed my eyes. However, the pain I expected never came. I snapped my eyes open and saw a tall figure standing in front of me, firmly gripping my father's wrist before he could strike. The force was immense, and my father's face turned pale from the pain. "How dare you? Who are you to lay hands on me?" My mother was so frightened that she hurriedly pulled Sabrina behind her. I lifted my head in a daze, and against the backlight, I could only make out the cold metallic glint on the man's shoulder insignia. A clear, commanding voice rang out. "I'd like to ask you, dear father-in-law, on what grounds you think you can lay a hand on my wife at my own doorstep?" When Chadwick stood at the courtyard gate, I almost didn't dare recognize him. He was no longer the despondent figure in a wheelchair, but stood tall in a crisp dark green military uniform, his legs long and straight. The silver gray mask that once hid his face was gone, revealing deep set eyes and a sharply defined jawline. He stood there, radiating the pressure of someone long accustomed to authority. My father froze, his gaze locked on the gold star on Chadwick's shoulder, his face slowly draining of color. "Are you General Burke of the USA's Fort Worth district?" The sound of engines faded from the alley, and the house finally returned to silence. Only Chadwick and I remained, standing face to face, the air filled with a subtle awkwardness. After learning that he was a general of the USA's Fort Worth district, even my breathing unconsciously softened. He noticed my stiffness and softened his voice, explaining, "I received intelligence that someone within the military district of Washington was suspected of leaking information, and the matter was serious. Enough that I had to investigate personally. To avoid alerting them, I disguised myself as a low-ranking disabled officer to blend in. Attending the banquet that day was just an excuse to get close to the target, but I never expected you to pick my lot." He changed his tone, a gentle smile appearing in his eyes. "But that night wasn't the first time we met." He explained, 5 years ago, near the border, a merchant who had been shot collapsed in a reed marsh. You dragged him to safety, treated his wounds, and left him half a canteen of water and some compressed biscuits. There was a hint of anticipation in his eyes. "Do you remember?" I thought hard, then finally shook my head. "No, I don't." The curve of Chadwick's lips stiffened, and he was briefly at a loss for words. My ears grew slightly warm, yet the atmosphere somehow felt much lighter than before. As we grew more familiar. Chadwick brought 2 wicker chairs out onto the balcony. We sat side by side in the gentle night breeze, chatting casually. Chadwick told me many stories about his time in the USA's Fort Worth district. He said he came from a military family, grew up in military compounds, and never truly suffered much. 18. He entered the National Defense University, and during his first live combat exercise, he led his team to take down their opponents, impressing many veteran officers. 25. He led a border counter-infiltration operation, completed the mission with 0 casualties, and even the local civilians remembered their unit's code name. As I listened, I could almost see that spirited young officer strategizing in the command room, the first glimmer of stars appearing on his shoulder. As he spoke, Chadwick suddenly stopped and turned to me. What about you? What kind of life did you live before meeting me? My fingers traced the wicker pattern unconsciously as I lowered my eyes. After a long moment, I spoke softly. Well, I was someone my family could easily abandon at any time. Chadwick's breathing faltered, and without speaking, he quietly moved his chair closer. His shoulder brushed against mine, carrying a steady warmth. I continued speaking, my voice very soft, as if I were telling someone else's story. By the end, my nose stung slightly, and just as I raised my hand, Chadwick gently held my wrist. The warmth of his palm seeped through my sleeve, firm and reassuring. Instead of telling me not to feel sad, he simply murmured, "That will never happen again. With me, you will always come first, and no one can replace you. Coco, once things here are settled, come back with me. I'll give you a real wedding." I looked up at him. The light in Chadwick's eyes was brighter than the stars in the night sky, and warmer too. The night breeze brushed past, leaves rustling softly as stars shimmered overhead. At that moment, I could tell I was falling for him too. On a weekend morning, I walked into a boutique and reached out to touch the pearly white evening dress in the display window. A disgustingly sweet voice sounded behind me. "I'll take this one." I didn't need to turn around to know it was Sabrina. She hurried forward and reached out to snatch the dress from my hands. "Coco, I have an important banquet to attend next week. I really need this to make an impression." I tightened my grip on the dress without letting go. As we argued, there was a stir at the entrance of the boutique, followed by the store manager's eager greeting. "Welcome, Major Riley." I looked up and saw Lucas standing at the door, his military jacket draped casually over his arm, travel worn, as if he had just returned from an out-of-town exercise. His gaze swept over Sabrina and me, his brows slightly furrowed, before he looked at me and spoke in his usual condescending tone. "Coco, give it to Sabby. It's just a dress." I gave a cold laugh. "On what grounds?" Lucas's frown deepened, clearly impatient. "Have you forgotten my conditions? If you want to join the Riley family, you've got to accommodate Sabby's requests. Why are you arguing in public over a piece of clothing?" I fell silent. No one around him had even told him that I was married. Just as I was about to speak, a familiar voice sounded behind me, tinged with amusement. "Well, I certainly didn't know my wife would be remarrying." Lucas spun around, his face changing instantly. "What did you say?" Chadwick walked in at an unhurried pace, dressed in a neatly pressed dark green military uniform, a paper bag from the dessert shop I had casually mentioned yesterday hanging from his hand. Ignoring everyone else, he went straight to my side, naturally wrapping an arm around my shoulders and drawing me closer to him. "Since you've just returned from a drill, you may not have heard yet. A few days ago, Coco married me. She is now my lawful wife." Hearing this, the composure on Lucas' face shattered instantly, and he immediately clenched his fists. He muttered softly, "Impossible." He then sharply turned to Sabrina. "Is what he said true?" Sabrina's face went pale as she stepped back slightly, her voice barely audible. "He's the disabled old man that Coco picked during her banquet. And also General Burke of the USA's Fort Worth district." Lucas stared at me, his eyes bloodshot. "Coco? Did you really marry him?" Before I could respond, Chadwick had already stepped in front of me, blocking me from his vision. "Do you like this dress?" he asked me, lowering his head, his tone casual. "Then buy it. If it feels too plain, add a matching shawl. The pink dress you liked last time is available too. Take that home as well." As he spoke, he signaled the sales associate to ring it up and paid swiftly with his card. When Chadwick and I left together, Lucas remained rooted to the spot. He kept muttering under his breath, "How could this be? I'm the one she loves the most." When the Joint Chiefs of Staff held its anniversary banquet, Chadwick was naturally among the guests. I had already made up my mind not to join the excitement, but I couldn't withstand his persistent coaxing over several days. "My lady," he leaned close to my ear, lowering his voice and putting on a deliberately aggrieved tone. "Do you really have the heart to let me go alone?" When I turned my face away and ignored him, he pushed his luck and moved even closer, his lashes fluttering with a mischievous glint in his eyes. "Besides, are you not going to get jealous? Given my handsome looks, if some general's daughter sets her sights on me, I might not be able to fend her off." His expression broke my composure, and I laughed as I pretended to pinch the soft spot at his waist. In the end, I still couldn't resist and attended the banquet together with him. The moment we stepped into the banquet hall, gazes from all directions locked onto us like shadows. Low murmurs drifted through the air. "Have you heard? General Jansen's daughter angrily drew a marriage lot at her 21st birthday party and randomly picked a wheelchair-bound soldier. Guess what? He turned out to be General Burke of the USA's Fort Worth district." "Exactly. The higher-ups originally wanted to match him with Brian Allister's granddaughter, but he publicly declared he would marry no one but Chloe, even showing up with a full motorcade and the most formal rites. It was like something out of a drama." Someone in the corner added sourly, "So that makes her a general's wife?" Chadwick's base is in Fort Worth, though. Does a wedding held here even count? I instinctively tightened my fingers around Chadwick's sleeve. As if sensing my unease, his warm palm immediately covered my hand, giving it a gentle squeeze in silent reassurance. Just as the banquet reached its peak, the doors were thrown open. "Commander, something's wrong. Sir Elroy's grandson fell into the man-made lake." The entire hall fell silent at once, and the commander at the head table sprang to his feet as everyone hurried after the guards toward the hotel's back garden. As soon as we passed through the archway, we saw a crowd gathered by the lake. When we got closer, Sabrina and Nicholas were being restrained by two security officers with their hands pinned behind their backs. "What happened?" the senior officer asked grimly. The head of security stepped forward at once. "Reporting, Commander." At the time of the incident, only these two were present on the west side of the garden. We took control immediately upon arrival. Before he finished speaking, a nanny burst out from behind the crowd in tears, pointing at Sabrina. It was her. Mr. Elroy was flying a drone by the lake and accidentally bumped into this young lady. Just as the child was about to apologize, she shoved him straight into the water. Sabrina trembled all over, her face instantly turning pale. She scanned the crowd in panic, her gaze finally locking onto Nicholas as she screamed through tears. "It was my brother. He pushed the child because he was in the way. I couldn't stop him." "What did you say?" Nicholas jerked his head up and struggled violently against his restraint, staring at her in disbelief, his eyes filled with shock and disappointment. "You're lying, Sabrina. You were the one who dashed Nicholas." Sabrina cut him off sharply, tears streaming down her face. "You pushed him. You even said just now that the child was rude and in the way. Why are you admitting to it now?" Nicholas looked at her twisted expression and tried to speak, but nothing came out. He closed his eyes and said softly, "It wasn't me. I only ran over when I heard the cries for help." Seeing this, my parents staggered forward toward the commander, nearly dropping to their knees. "Commander, please look into this. Our children would never do such a thing. There must be some misunderstanding. How would Savvy and Nick dare hurt Sir Elroy's grandson?" Madame Elroy looked livid and was about to speak when a guard stepped forward, holding a clear evidence bag. "Commander, we found a button in Mr. Elroy's hand." The delicate pearl button inside the bag was the exact accessory from Sabrina's dress that day, down to the same spiral pattern. My parents whipped their heads around and stared at Sabrina in disbelief. "You actually framed your own brother? Nick dotes on you endlessly. How could you be so vicious?" Sabrina collapsed to the ground, staring at the button, her lips trembling as she lost the ability to speak. The commander's face was dark as he spoke coldly. "She deliberately harmed a child, which is an extremely serious offense. Call the police. General Jansen, you failed to discipline your daughter, and you'll be suspended as well, pending review." Sabrina struggled and cried out, "I'm sorry, Commander. I didn't know he was Sir Elroy's grandson. I really didn't." The moment the punishment was announced, my father collapsed onto a bench, his face ashen. Nicholas stood rigidly in place, as if his soul had been drained, his gaze empty as he stared at the ground. After a moment, he slowly lifted his head and looked straight at me through the crowd. I met his eyes for only a second before looking away. Indeed, they had learned their lesson. As I turned to leave, Nicholas suddenly burst into hysterical laughter. As he laughed, tears poured out. This must be karma. The car wheels slowly started rolling, heading onto the airport expressway. I leaned against the window, watching the cityscape race past outside. Suddenly, two staggering figures appeared in the rearview mirror, hoarse cries piercing through the glass. "Coco, it's all our fault." They continued, "Please come back. We know what we've done wrong now." The hand resting on my lap trembled slightly, my fingers tightening without thought. Through the tinted window, I saw my parents' figures looking especially worn in the wind, their hairlines seemingly streaked with much more white, all the days and nights that had been ignored. All the swallowed grievances surged back like a tide, yet to my surprise, my heart held no more ripples, only a calm sense of release. I finally withdrew my gaze and raised the car window, shutting out both the sobbing wind and the past. Chadwick gently took my hand, warmth spreading from his palm. "It's all over." "Yes," I said, looking out at the endless sea of clouds beyond the window, a faint but genuine curve forming on my lips. "It's time to move forward." Some cracks could never be mended, and true farewell often began only after the heart had gone numb. This time, I would not look back. The end. Make sure to like and subscribe Bunny Bookery so you can get latest updates.